Good afternoon. How are you? Well, it's a comfortable day, although Thomas Jefferson tells me it's 87 degrees. Humidity's 55, and I suppose that makes the difference because it was like 97 yesterday when I was not on the trail. I was out, but it was raining, and so I couldn't make any message the way I am now. The wind is 3.3 miles an hour, but the trees that protect me from some of the heat mean I don't get that wind, so that's okay. There are a bunch of things to talk about, but I'm interested as a guy who was a prosecutor and a criminal defense lawyer about the P. Diddy case. And I think it may tell us a few things about jurors and fairness. And let me say this about P. Diddy. I don't know his music. I've seen him at a distance. I saw the terrible way he treated his friend, his lady friend, his girlfriend. And so those things are all horrible. But something happened at that trial that's interesting as well. And the question is, what was the government thinking when they brought this case? The racketeering charges and so forth never seemed to me to really fit what was going on. I recoil at the descriptions of what they were doing. Okay, so all of that is a prelude to me saying that, and you probably know this by now, he was denied bail after he was acquitted of the sex trafficking and racketeering charges. So the jury didn't buy that. And the jury, by the way, is a mixed group. Men and women, different geographic places in New York, all with some sort of college degree or thinking. And apparently they had thoughtful discussions, although I haven't heard any jurors talking to third parties yet. It may happen, it may not happen. It's up to them. I always had a rule as a prosecutor of not asking until one day I had a case and I couldn't figure out why the jury seemed to be mad at me, and I expected that meant there was going to be an acquittal, and instead there was a conviction. And so I asked the jurors why, and they said that they thought that, not I, but the government was correct. They didn't want to convict, but they thought that that was their responsibility to follow the instructions of the court, and they did. And in a way, I had made them do this. And those weren't the exact words, obviously. So in this case, without the jurors telling me, I want to make a couple of observations. First of all, that these life sentences in the racketeering and sex trafficking cases, he could have gotten a life imprisonment from those two, and he didn't. And so there's little wonder why he doesn't fall down and pray, literally, in court. Now, what was he convicted of? What he was convicted of was transporting across state lines for purposes of prostitution or immoral purposes. So these each can hold 10-year sentences. That's the maximum. I don't know that he has any prior history that would justify a guideline that wasn't something like 3 years. Prosecution is going to ask for 20 or something ridiculous, but they're going to be talking about other conduct of which he was acquitted, so that doesn't make sense. The act that he's being convicted of is the Mann Act. It goes back to the White Slave Traffic Act of 1910, named after the Illinois congressman who offered the provision. And let me go back. You transport a woman, presumably across state lines, for prostitution or immoral purposes. What are the immoral purposes? Is that a good basis? Now, and how do they prove prostitution? Now, I haven't seen the case, and maybe these things were covered very well, and I haven't read the instruction to the jury, but I would take heart about an appeal involving a question like this. Were they there by consent? Did whatever money they get have to do with prostitution specifically? In other words, did they make their case? Did the judge rule for them in such a way that they were permitted, the prosecution, to introduce certain evidence to the court? All those things. And then, what's an immoral purpose? Okay, you and I have our own views about it, but as a matter of law, is it an immoral purpose to go across state lines to have sex? The fact that the jury didn't buy the racketeering or trafficking makes it harder, in my mind, to understand how they did the Mann Act prosecution, how they did those convictions. So I think, and they have the defense has on its team, it has appellate counsel. So they were looking for these things all along. I have the sense that the government overcharged the case. They so believed in what they were doing. And they didn't appreciate, maybe they were too close to the blue laws than the reality of who we are and what we're about these days. And maybe they didn't carry their burden. Maybe they went too far. There's that. So that's the problem that I see. So I think he faces 2 years in prison, and he wasn't hurt as he could have been with those other cases, and so it's little wonder, therefore, that he just lay down and prayed. I have to wonder why he wasn't given bail. I'm serious. I think that the opportunities he has by staying here are greater than the need to run. That's a hard thing to say, and I don't know that he would think those things, but I thought the government leaned hard, and the court heard the government, and they said, well, he's a threat to the community and so forth because he has been violent. He has been violent. I would just look at it differently, I think. And the defense said, this is vastly different than the other charges, and I think that's right. So, a few food for thought. The nature of P. Diddy's life and of entertainers and people with these bizarre freak out sex occasions, I can't in my friends or experiences find anything that parallels that. But is it criminal? And some of it, I guess, is. But the only thing the jury could find criminal with the instructions of the judge were that he transported a woman across state line. And this act was used against blacks. A famous case, of course, is the boxer Johnson, who I think it happened in Chicago, and he was prosecuted for it. Some said because they wanted and waited for the Great White Hope. And as a younger guy, I did see the Great White Hope on Broadway. And in those days, I assume and hope it's still true, I paid a pittance to stand at the back of the theater and was able to see that and other Broadway shows. So that's one thing. The house, once the people's house, now hostage to the greedy capitalists. And there's no room for us, folk, not in the house of the people. The house of the people is no longer the house of the people. The Johnson and his caucus cult are split as to what they can and should be doing. Some of the Republicans in the Republican caucus want greater increases in the deficit. Others want deeper cuts in Medicaid. And of course they want to give money to those who have money and take it from those who rely on the safety net to be at greater risk or entirely, exclusively, individually subject to perfect risk, so that when they are ill or they do need food or any of the things that we the people ordained was part of our government's purpose is not part of the Republicans' purpose, not part of Trump's purpose. And they talk in an oleaginous way, oily, persuasive, friendly, they care for you, but then they don't do shit. They're sentencing us to an uncertain future so that we are more limited in our ability to resist the autocracy, oligarchy, dictatorship, myopic view of America that lingers and moves at night in shady places with coercion and force. It was interesting that Carville was on the air today. He was basically saying, and his message has changed, in my opinion, maybe not in his, but it's gotten more forceful for democracy. And maybe it's unnecessary to say that. But what he's talking about is the power that we need lays in the voting box. And that's what he's counting on. My emphasis is that's fine, but what if we don't get a chance to have that election? And we can't be less our fight against autocracy in the march to monarchy, presuming that that's going to work, because that was the error of Biden and all the other Democrats. Don't get me wrong, it's not just Biden, and I supported Biden, but the thing that they did wrong was to presume they didn't have to prosecute Trump, they didn't have to fight him outright, it would all be taken care of at the ballot box. And it wasn't. It wasn't, because not only did the Republicans have a huge, limitless war chest, but they lied to effect. And to say somebody won an election based on lying to people all the time, that's a hell of a win, right? But that's what we have. And so when we talk about a mandate, it was a mandate to do things that they're not doing in the big bad bill. So now I am encouraged by the fact that the Dems were open-throated, full of voice and shout and scream, finally, about what's happening. And there's a procedural vote today, which you may know about the result before you hear this uploaded walk and talk. And the procedural vote is whether to just take the Senate bill, their big bad bill, and just sign off on it. Now, every bill that goes to the floor goes to the Rules Committee to set the rules for how the vote is done. And a procedural rule was written. It was opposed by Norman and Roy, Republicans, and Dems, because they, the Republicans, and we, the Democrats, I say we, I'm not on the Hill, but my heart and soul go with anybody who's opposing the big bad bill, and I'm glad to be a Democrat who's observing Democratic members fighting, really fighting for a change. And that's exciting. Now the Republicans have the caucus of the House Freedom Caucus, and they are opposed to the Senate bill. But they went to the White House today, and who knows where they stand right now. And by the time you hear this walk and talk, you'll know if the procedural bill to just take the Senate as it is and be done with it is going to work or not. It's going to take a lot of coercion, a lot of arm twisting, and that's unfortunate. So that's what I have today. It's a warm day, but it's pleasant too. So I say goodbye to you from today to tomorrow But we'll have another walk and talk. All the best. Bye-bye.